And welcome to our discussion for TEL 711. And this week we are talking about three critical concepts from the Mertens readings. We'll be discussing implications of the concepts for conducting research on our problems of practice. So I'll get started and kind of just talk about, as an overview, the paradigms, I think, for me, were one of the critical concepts. And Merton identified four different paradigms: post-positivism, constructivist, transformative, and pragmatic. It was quite a bit of reading. I did appreciate the chart that was in there and kind of looking at that, but honestly, looking at the chart first before I read it wasn't very helpful for me. I had to go through and kind of read each and take it apart and think about sort of contextual applications, and then went back up and looked at the chart, and then it was a little more helpful. Fun fact, the word hermeneutics was a new word for me. I'd never heard of that before. The study of interpretive understanding that was part of constructivist. I had not heard of that. So, but yeah, that's like for me the first critical concept. And I had determined throughout that I align most closely, I believe, with the pragmatic approach. In my research, I definitely want to do a mixed methods, like quantitative and qualitative are both important to me. I've read Dewey in the past. I'm actually very familiar with some of his past work, and it also aligns with like a lot of my thoughts. And just the whole, for me, it's just like a logical approach to things that just makes sense. Like it's not too much in one school. I feel like it's almost like a happy medium. I don't know if that's even scholarly sounding, but that's, I guess, how I approach that. So
I'm going to jump in there real quick and just tell you that I think, when I was reading through the four, like I immediately thought constructivist, just because my prior graduate school training was in sociology. So I tend to look at everything through the lens of like social construction, like we make meaning together, again, I didn't want to start slipping into the philosophical realm of like, is there one reality? Is there more than one reality? There's one reality, but we all have different takes on the reality. And I can't stay there very long. It just hurts my brain. But this idea that there's social constructions and that we make meaning of things that, transcend and can also transform and evolve over time, over place. But then when I was thinking about my actual pop, I was thinking, I think I'm going to fall more under the pragmatic perspective, like the way that I've designed, the way that I'm thinking about the pop, the way that I'm looking at designing it. It made me think about this question. What comes first, chicken or the egg? This might not even be a real question. Do you think about how you want to explore a problem, and then therefore that influences which of these paradigms you use? Or do you do you start from these four paradigms and then decide, upon looking at your challenge, how you're going to frame the actual problem? Like, it made me just curious about that. Anyway, I don't think there's a answer we're going to get to today, but like, what comes first? How you want to explore a problem, or what's the actual problem you want to explore?
yeah,
Just random
I
thoughts.
mean, that's an interesting question. And I think, I don't know, I would argue that you could do both. I felt like in this exercise, it was more about us looking at the frameworks and trying to figure out where our problem fell. But I think that you could also take your problem and look at these frameworks and get ideas of strengthening it through one of these frameworks. So, like,
Right.
based on what I know about your pop, since you and I have been like critical friends from the
Yeah.
beginning, I'm curious why you are not in the transformative framework, because I feel that a lot of your work is in that realm. So why do you think that you're not there?
I I mean, I always feel like I traipse in that space. Like this is all about social justice work, but not so directly that I'm not thinking about, like, the methodology isn't about constructing the questions with them. Um, in terms of a social action at the end, yeah, maybe if this works, if this idea that I have works, it isn't so much about, I don't know if it's so much about the that I don't know if I can oh, this is a good question, but I can't answer it well. I don't know if I can reduce it down to specific groups of people. Like, to me, I think that's really important in the transformative. Like, do I think that learning, teaching and learning isn't something that we understand well and we're doing fairly across all, subgroups of students? I don't think we are, but I don't think that it's something that I would approach from that perspective, although it's a really good thought. Like, if I were to, what would it look like, right? Like, if I was going to take a transformative perspective, how would that change the actual design? I don't know, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I interrupted you. Keep going.
No. I asked you that question because like
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of stay on this for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And as far as constructivist is concerned, I always thought I kind of fell there too, but I feel like so I wrote down qualitative as one of my bullet points for constructivist. Like that's kind of what like guides it. Whereas pragmatic is mixed methods. And for me, particularly in the work I've done in the past couple years, I found extreme value in both. Like I find so much value. Like I love looking at quantitative data and chart and like the graphs that I get out of it. And I feel
Right.
like I get this really impactful, logical like answer to do things. And so I think that's why I'm leaning in that direction. But yeah, so that we don't take up all of our time in this first one, I will go to the next critical concept, which for me I felt like were the belief systems that were sort of outlined. So there was the axiological or ethics. There was the ontological or reality. I hope I say this word right. Is it epistemological? Is it epit or
That one.
epistemological or
Yeah,
epistemological?
epistemological.
Relating to knowledge, and then methodological. So really for me, just like the concepts that I gathered out of this after I kind of determined right now that I'm in the pragmatic, I just focused mostly on those realms for the pragmatic. And so my summary of it was that for the axiological, it's influenced by researchers' values and politics. For the ontological, all individuals have their own unique interpretation of reality. Like there is a reality that's the reality, but everyone can have their own unique interpretation of it. For the knowledge, again, it's determined by the researcher. So relationships and research are determined by the researcher. And then again, for methodological, which I've talked about already, is that it can be qualitative or quantitative or mixed methods. And I think that it's predominantly mixed methods. And I think that that's, I align with that. So I
Yeah.
appreciated how these belief systems were like spelled out, and then they kind of gave you what those belief systems were to kind of help you figure out, I think, where you align. That's kind of how I interpreted it anyway.
No, I think I was just looking at my notes. Same thing. I felt like when I started reading about those four belief systems for the pragmatic, then I just realized the way I've structured the work in my concept paper definitely falls under this. It's not so concerned about like the truth of like whose reality is the truth at hand. It's more like, can we make a difference in student retention? And if we can, what can we learn from it? And I do think that the mixed methods is the way I want to go as well, which is I do think that, whether I start with qualitative or quantitative and vice versa, end with the other, I in this case want to establish a what. Like, is there a relationship, and if there is or there isn't, then and then unpack that with the qualitative. I naturally will always have a qualitative. That's just I always gravitate. That's why I thought this was going to be more constructivist for me. But for the work that I'm trying to do to try to influence the system that I'm in at the college, a purely qualitative perspective isn't enough. Like, and maybe I'm rushing it, but again, this leads to your third point, right, about the politics of things, which is if I can't speak quantitatively or if I can't give some of that information, I feel like no one's going to listen to this work. And I don't know if that's fair to say or right or wrong to say, but that's how I feel. So why don't you tell us about your third point? Because it's definitely.
Yeah. Well, before you get there, though, I'll stay a little bit longer on the whole quantitative because I'm in the same boat as you. I work for a university, I'm grant funded. And I think that's what drives me as well, because like I can interview the teachers and the students all day long, but until I show them numbers from a
Right.
quantitative graph, that's where we're going to go into politics and paradigms, which was what I found as the third critical concept. So,
Right.
and I didn't write a whole lot on it. Like it dictates, as you mentioned, like both of our lives, but essentially in Mertens reading, it was where you get money for your research, and it's what drives policy.
Right.
And interestingly enough, like we were talking about this earlier, it said that most of it is given to post positivism, which is where quantitative is predominant. But I think we're missing some voices by staying strictly quantitative, and I think that that's a shame.
Yeah, we're missing voices, and we're missing, to go to Lee's conversation, right, from the last class, the rich context. And I've been on the end of, mentoring used to get major federal appropriations. Mentoring the field used to get major appropriations. And when No Child Left Behind started to come in, and other evidence, and I'm all for evidence-based,
Mm-hmm.
but what constitutes as evidence is what's interesting,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because, I've seen really bad science and poor evidence-based models that are just like, if you're just looking for that asterisk or the two asterisks, that's great, but what does it mean, and what is it not telling you? And there's so much unpacking to do that goes to Lee's article about the whys, and the why and the why and the why, and we're making these blanket assumptions of what works and what doesn't work. And when you pull these dollars, you're like ripping the band-aid off of so many different programs that are actually making a difference, but they don't have the right resources to have good research done on them, or even if they did, to the point of that part of Mertens' book, which is it's not the mindset of the political arena to allow for that kind of differentiation, or that kind of that it just I don't want to get too political, but anyways, the point is that I think there's a balance, and I feel like we swung way too far to one end, and we're not giving space. So evidence, or evidence-based, according to mainstream, is quantitative and not qualitative, and therein lies part of the problem, right? So anyways,
I agree with you, but we're going to change that, right? We're going
right.
to produce our amazing action research that will be mixed methods,
Yeah,
qualitative and quantitative. So,
you helped me make much better sense of this by talking, so I appreciate it.
oh, that's good. That's fantastic. Well, that's it for now, and we will see everyone in the next round of discussion. So have a great night, everyone. Bye.
See you. Bye, Kel.